Hey, everybody, welcome back to MIC Crime Spot. Another episode here of the Pergola Files. I think this is episode 6 already. I hope you guys are all enjoying this. Frank is here today. We got a few topics we're going to go over, but first topic of today, Frank, we're going to talk a little bit about, or a lot of it, about Anthony Gaspipe Casso. Let us know, when did this individual come on your radar? When did you first really start hearing about this guy?
Well, uh, he was really not my concern. 1983 to 89, I was working on three different RICO cases, the murders. My only knowledge of Casso was in the 70s when I was walking my dog on 86th Street. I used to see him in front of the 19th hole with Faneri, Lastarino, and Conti and others. He was known in the neighborhood as criminally insane sociopath. He had no regard for human life. This was his reputation. He was not known to do any dismemberments because he wanted the bodies found so people paid their loans and so on and so forth. My first encounter with Casso and had to do with the murder of a guy named Dilapi out in Los Angeles. In 1983, I was working in a major case squad. We had 6 men responding to all the organized crimes in Bath Beach and all over the city. And we had one of those 6 men was Steve Caracappa, who was a house mouse that was in the major case squad, used to take all our information. Unknown to us, he was working for Casso. During that period of time, we get a visit from the Los Angeles Police Department detectives uh, who were looking at what we were doing, and we were corresponding back and forth. They maintained a contact with Caracappa, who was like the house mouse in the major case squad. Now, in the major case squad, we kept files on all the organized crime people, and there was a folder on Dilapi, the murder victim. In the folder was a photo and a rap sheet and some other information. I was sent to the U.S. Attorney's Office to work on his RICO murders, and I learned there of the Dilapi murder. So I visit the major case squad, which is right across the street from the U.S. Attorney's Office. I go up to her office on the 8th floor, and I pull Dilapi's file, and his photo's missing. Later on, I learned that Steve located Dilapi in Los Angeles and sent a photo of that photo to the Los Angeles detectives that found him. They found Dilapi. They told Steve where he was, and he told Casso, and Casso told two of his guys, Conti and Diarco, to go to Los Angeles and kill, and that's what they did. Now in 2020, I'm retired. This is where I really learned about him because I had nothing else to do anyway. We were assisting the New York City Police Department cold case squad with detectives Tommy Days and Joe Ponzi, who were also retired. And we solved 23 other organized crime murders. 17 of those were DeMeo hits that Montiglia finally remembered so many years later. And we got this all over the telephone from him in New Mexico. I reviewed Casso's 302s from 1994 from the FBI. I read his book, Gaspipe. I reviewed his testimony before Congress, and I found it to be truthful and credible. The FBI flips Gambino underboss Gravano and finds him more valuable and discredits Cassos and kills his agreement. The U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District claims Casso lied. Actually, Casso's testimony discredited Gravano and reveals his involvement in a drug smuggling operation known as Terry's Dream. Casso and 4 or 5 of the organized crime families in the 1970s were importing 20 tons of marijuana 500,000 quaaludes on a quarterly basis from Colombia to the USA, with multiple millions of dollars in profits. They were doing this quarterly and then exporting hijacked handguns from JFK to Colombia. Casso had 5 shrimp boats, a jet plane. The participants were DeMeo, Mr. Angelo, Bennett, uh, Ruggiero, Gravano, Savino, and Faranga, and others. This resulted in 5 Florida murders and 2 New York City murders of potential witnesses because Terry's Dream was confiscated in 1978 by U.S. Customs. They made 15 arrests and 15 people were indicted. Now, we're still in 2020, and I'm still working with the cold case squad in the New York City Police Department. We identify all the victims except a guy named Bernie, a male white, 43 years old, 375 pounds, running guns for Vincent Gigante and Dominic Galangi, Genovese people. Bernie was killed by Ansorian and Lastarino in Hollywood, Florida in 1978 in a warehouse, which was the property of Danny Buciano, a guy from Brooklyn that Casso knew. They buried this guy under a gazebo in Buciano's backyard. They had to use a dolly to move him from the warehouse into the gazebo. All these participants in the smuggling operation used to meet regularly in a Hollywood lounge in Florida, which I find there later on. The guy that owned the Hollywood lounge was a guy named Richie Barbera, who was involved in the smuggling operation. He was killed on the order of Casso in 1978 with his girlfriend. Now, I attempted to identify Bernie. I contacted the Broward County Sheriff's Office, the Missing Persons Unit in Broward County. Florida had a cold case commission. I contacted them, and alcohol, tobacco, and firearms about the gun operation, and everything was negative. Casso's interview in 1994 revealed that Bernie was ordered killed by Vincent Gigante, the Genovese boss, because he was a suspected informant. The contract went from Gigante to Dominic Galangi, who lived in Florida, to Ansorian at the Hollywood Lounge. That contract was made. In 2020, I was living in Florida. I drove from West Palm Beach to Hollywood, Florida, and I found a residence that looked like the one that Casso was describing in his FBI interviews. It was on the Dixie Highway. I reviewed the real estate information in Broward County, and nothing came back to Buciano, so that ran negative. I sent 3 letters to Casso in jail. 2 of them were returned from the Bureau of Prisons unanswered. He answered 1, and he wasn't sure about Bernie's name, but he told me that he remembered that somebody said he was a relative of Meyer Lansky from the Jewish Mafia. Casso passed in 2020 in prison, and the case remained cold. I didn't give up. I found Lansky's son and daughter in Tampa, Florida, who told me Lansky had a stepson who was murdered in 1977 in Miami. So my hopes got stimulated. Lansky's daughter was a very unusual woman, very elderly. Also told me in 1978, Lansky was a bookkeeper for the mob and took it to social functions in Hollywood, California. And she became very friendly with Dean Martin, the singer, and Frank Sinatra. Lansky's stepson was a guy named Richard Schwartz, who owned a restaurant in Miami, Florida in 1977. Had a dispute with a Genovese wise guy, and he shot and killed the Genovese wise guy's son. And this resulted in a contract from Gigante again in New York to Florida, and Schwartz was murdered. Schwartz was not Barney, who I thought it was, but it wasn't. And it wasn't 375 pounds. You know, there's always a murder that homicide detectives do not solve. Bernie was mine. His remains remained buried in Florida for 47 years. If any of the viewers know anything about a missing persons named Bernie in 1978, I wish that they would call you, Brett.
So Frank, you don't even have a last name. Is that what you're telling me?
No, I don't even know if his first name was really Bernie.
Okay.
You know, all I know is he was 375 and male, white, 43 years old. That's the information we gave to the missing persons people in Broward County. They couldn't find anything like it.
Okay.
But there, the guy's laying in a grave for 47 years under that gazebo.
Wow. 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 So that's wild. So I want to go back to Terry's dream. So in the late 70s, as you said, they seize a bunch of property on boats, quaaludes, marijuana, whatever it may be. I know Casso was involved in some large scale heroin trade from over in Asia, also in the 1970s. So these guys were really heavy into drugs. During the trial, U.S. versus Castellano, that Terry's dream thing comes out, right? Because they whack the guy Bennett, who Mastrangelo was getting cars, renting trucks from for this operation. Talk about Bennett's murder and some of the circumstances surrounding that incident.
Well, Bennett, we find out later, was murdered by Lasarino and Joey Testa. He was on his way to court to testify in this Terry's dream case. Mr. Angelo was the target in that trial. And after that murder, there were like 4 or 5 different appeals from Master Angelo saying that they couldn't use Bennett's testimony because he was dead. And you know what? After the 5th one, he finally won.
Yeah.
And he walked away from the case. And he was the guy that was transporting all the drugs from Terry's Dream in Queens when they confiscated it to a warehouse that the Mayo had someplace in Shipshead Bay. Or, I don't even know where it was. I'm not sure.
Yeah. 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 He's just another guy, like one of these other under the radar DeMeo crew members. He had, I believe he was the proprietor of R Twice Collision. Frank, is that correct?
That's right.
So one thing that we spoke about, which we didn't talk to the audience about, is the time when you and Joe Coffey and everybody actually raided R Twice Collision and you arrested a bunch of these guys. So can you talk about that? Talk about every crew member that was there, if you could remember, and the whole situation with that raid.
Well, we had to place under surveillance, and we were waiting for this crew to enter our twice collision. And I'm in a car with my partner, and we're waiting. Joe Coffey was in another car, and we see Joey Testa pull up. Goes inside with one of his little purses in his hand, and then Anthony Center shows up, and he goes inside with his little purse, and Henry Borelli goes in. I think Paulie Pinto was there, a guy named Ronnie Tariki, and I really can't remember how many. There must have been 6 or 7 of them. Anyway, we're waiting and waiting and waiting, and Joe Coffey sees something and he calls it. He says, "Let's go." So he thought he saw some kind of a transaction. So we run in. Everybody runs in, and I didn't realize I was faced with a concrete curb in front of me, and I step on the gas and I hit this thing and I blow the front two tires. So now we gotta get out of the car, run across the street. We run inside, and I see Joe running into a door. So I run in after him, and he's got Joey Tessa's head in the toilet bowl. So I said, Joe, what are you doing? I pulled the guy's head out of the toilet bowl. It's, I was a little upset. So we got them back inside. Now he makes them all lay on the floor with their brand new clothes on.
Yeah.
And they objected very hard, but so I finally got Joey up and I'm handcuffing him. He probably appreciated that because he was getting all dirty. And we took him away and locked him up.
And that was the arrest that led to the 1984 indictments? Was that arrest?
That's when we indict. That's when the indictments came down, and that's where we made the arrest.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, and going back to Gaspipe with that whole Dilapi murder, in that time frame that he gets killed, Gaspipe is basically he's whacking out a bunch of like Bronx faction Lucchese guys. He's whacking guys that have been involved in the mafia.
He whacked everybody he thought was ratting against him. That's one reason he made the bodies stay in the street so people would get the message: don't be a rat.
Yeah, and then he starts killing guys who had been in that life probably since he was born. Really just taking out old timers. And
listen, when in 2020 when I started looking at him, and I got all this information about the murders he was confessing to with his in '94 to the FBI. I found 52 murders that he did. I think in his indictment he only confessed to 15 of them, but he actually did 52. I mean, it's nowhere near what the DeMaio crew do.
Right.
But you know what? To his own credit, he never dismembered a body that I know of.
Yeah.
I mean, he tortured a guy. He tortured Heidel because he was the guy that shot him.
Right. So, Frank, we teased a little while ago about some book that was coming out covering the work of investigators like yourself, also FBI agents, NYPD detectives, and you couldn't really talk about it at the time. People have asked about it. They want to know about it. So what's going on with this book that is supposed to be coming out?
Well, the book is supposed to be coming out November 25th, and it's called Empire City Under Siege by Greg McGuire. The cover of the book, when you look at it, is very misleading. It looks like it's all about, it appears to be only about the whole FBI. But in actuality, it's only about one of the best FBI agents I ever knew and his interaction with the New York City police detectives. He has been my friend for 40 years. The book demonstrates how the FBI and New York City Police Department detectives work together on organized crime, hijackings, and murders. The cover does not mention the actions of New York City Police Department detectives McCabe, Tommy Days, Joe Ponzi, Terror, and Pergola, which actually ended organized crime in New York City in the 1980s and reduced the number of murders in 1980. Make no mistake about this book and other books we're in. Bible of the Organized Crime Murders, Murder Machine by Capisi, Friends of the Family by Tommy Dades, Blood on the Badge by Mike Cannell. You can't make this shit up, but you can read about it. Empire City Under Siege by Greg McGuire, out November 25th. Please read it.
Yeah, glad to hear. Now, let me ask you about, and we're definitely going to talk about it when it comes out. We'll plug it. Let me ask you about that relationship with the FBI and the NYPD, because a lot of the times you read or you see something. I mean, even in the movies, like, FBI doesn't want to cooperate with the local law enforcement. You see that a lot. They don't want to cooperate. They want to take a case. when you guys teamed up together, was that unprecedented, or was that something that had been happening for a long time as far as the mob?
My experience with the FBI, dealing with the FBI, working with the FBI is different from what a lot of people believe. My partner, an FBI agent on the U.S. versus Castellano, was a guy named Artie Ruffles. The guy was a gentleman. He, I don't know. There's not too much. There's so much I could say about him. It was typical. Now, the guy in the book was a guy named Anthony Nelson,
Mm-hmm.
and he was a guy that we worked with, and he was very close to Kenny McCabe, the organized crime expert in the New York City Police Department. And he was like a street cop. I mean, the guy was amazing. My experience with the FBI was even the boss. I mean, the boss of the Gambino crime uh, squad out in Queens. He asked me to help him with the cases that Gravano was confessing to. There were 19 murders he confessed to the FBI, and they had to clear. They had to bring them forth so he could plead to them. So, but he was giving them something like Joey Pots and Pans was killed on 18th Avenue in 2020. So I had a knack for finding these old homicides, and Bruce Mao was the boss, the ASAC, and the Gambino squad said, Frank, see if you can find these. So he gives me all the information. I go back to my friend up in the chief of detective's office, which is Maples, and we went through her books, and I found the 19 of them. I went to each precinct, pulled the file, and I took them out to Bruce Mao and the Gambino squad and gave them to him. So I really had a good relationship with these people. I can't say anything about them, especially Tony Nelson. The guy was a gentleman, and I've been in contact with him, and he's just as sick as I am. Probably he's old.
Crime fighting on the mind 24/7, right? Let me ask you though, Frank. It's up to you if you want to go down this path. We've spoken about it before. We haven't posted anything about it. You said before, you mentioned Sammy the Bull Gravano before, and you said that his testimony, I suppose, was better than gas pipes or something of the sort. There's been rumbles about Sammy the Bull, was heavily involved in drugs, maybe not fully admitted by the authorities, or like you said, maybe gas pipes, whatever he had wasn't as good. They were hungry for John Gotti. What is your opinion on any of that as far as Gravano with drugs and Terry's Dream or anything in that realm?
Well, they the reason they canceled the agreement they had with Casso is because they were afraid that he was going to screw up Gravano's testimony and discredit him. So they were afraid of Gaspipe. So they canceled his contract with the government, and that was it. And he went back to jail.
But do you think that Casso was going to make Sammy the Bull look worse than he was? In your honest opinion?
He would have screwed up his testimony, yeah. And they would have lost John Gotti. That was the whole thing. Casso was being groomed by the FBI to testify against Gotti. But then they flipped Gravano, and Gravano was a better witness than Casso. So they decided to shit can Casso.
Yeah. And in questioning you about that, Frank, and I just want everybody to know, like, I'm not attacking the integrity of the FBI or anything like that. I mean, I understand what's going on. I mean, half of these guys you're dealing with are complete, lunatics, murderous lunatics. So, I mean, I hope you understand what I'm saying, but it's just something that's often discussed, I should say, as far as Sammy and whatever else he might have been involved in.
Sammy continued as being involved in drugs when he went out to Arizona and got locked up again. So you can't change your leopard spots.
Of course. And he's last I checked, he's a Fox News correspondent, Frank. What do you think? What do you think about that?
You mean Sammy and his podcast?
No, he's on Fox News.
I
He's
don't
over
know.
there.
No comment.
No comment. Yeah, yeah. Here we are, ladies and gentlemen. Sammy the Bull. Yeah, it's weird. It's a weird world we live in, but I guess he has something to say. He's lived an interesting life after all. But yeah, he still. You know, it's funny, Frank. I'm sure you heard about this about Sammy when he was in that life, that taking out his friends, taking over their businesses, and real Machiavellian type activities. And he's seemingly the same way today. You know, he doesn't really get along with people he tries to work with in the entertainment world. So you're right. I don't think a leopard changes its spots.
Yeah, well, he's out there with his own crew too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Johnny Boom Bots or whatever you said before, Joey Pots and Pans or who?
Yeah, yeah. That's all he gave them. He made him crazy. So
Yeah.
it was just a good thing I was around to find those 19 because he couldn't plead before a judge without actual murder information. I found it.
Right. All right, Frank. So I think that's been a nice conversation we've had. Episode 6 of the Pergola Files. Anything you want to say to the audience and anything you want to leave everybody before we get out of here?
No, just do me a favor, read Empire City. Although you won't understand it when you look at the book, it doesn't really explain what's in it.
Yeah. 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 Well, we're
But it
going to
was
put it
well
up.
written. I haven't read it yet, so I don't know.
We're going to put it up on the channel. I'm definitely going to read it. We're going to make sure some of the audience reads it. There is a lot of readers and a lot of people interested in stories that pay attention to this channel. I'm interested in it. I like stories from both sides of the law. I find both things pretty valuable. So, Frank, thanks a lot, man. This has been fun once again.
Yeah. Okay. Have a nice day. You can't make this shit up.
Can't make it up, ladies and gentlemen.